Hail to the king, baby.
Welcome to Kingology, the podcast that covers chronologically the written stories of Stephen King and spin-off TV and movie adaptations of the same. Today, I am joined by an occasional and always very welcome co-host, Herman. How are you, Herman?
Hey, I'm great, Mark. Once again, entering the regular King universe with you, which feels strange. It still feels strange. I mean, we're the Dark Tower guys, but
Yeah.
you know, King
Our
is
little
King.
quartet. Yeah.
Yeah, we're breaking a bit the mold here, but I love it because we've done it twice before now, 3 times. I don't know, I can't count, but it's always enjoyable.
I mean, the last one we did was Unneedful Things. Which was kind of fun. I've gone on to do a few more since then with my other wonderful co-host Talicia, where we covered Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne, which are a kind of a pair. They kind of work that way. But you and I are now delving into his third short story collection.
That's right.
Graveyard Shift and no, if I said that right, Night Shift. Yeah, Night Shift. Sorry, I always get that one. Night Shift and Skeleton Crew, and this is his third anthology book. Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Is this material new to you, or have you read this one before?
No, I read this one as it became available, on the shelves, in South Africa when I was a lad. We had, this stationery / bookstore, CNA, and they always had King on their bestseller lists. They had a, bestseller list independently of the actual, worldwide bestseller list. So this was always, every time a Stephen King book came out, it was number one. So I picked it up around, early 90s, 92, I think it came out. I'm not quite sure. Can't remember. But I remember picking it up off the shelf.
I have to say, I'd gone through I did read this when it came out too, and I'd had kind of a long break from Stephen King because in my sort of life, I was doing some very intense research work in AI. And it really didn't allow me any leisure time at all. I was like working 16-hour days for months on end. But I'd about finished that period, and this was the first. I think this was the first book I went back to after all that, because I always liked Stephen King. Excuse me. So I read it at that time too, and quite liked it. Quite liked this collection.
Same.
Now, we aren't going to cover all the stories in this because there are 24. But what we're going to do is the first 8, and over the next 2 shows we'll be covering 8 at a time. And that way we're sort of breaking it up a bit because there's a lot to talk about, especially these first 8, because there's a lot of adaptations of these first 8.
That's right.
But I think after that it becomes a little easier because we'd just be sticking to the literary stuff. Now, so I do remember I have got the book, the original run, that weird purple and black cover kind of thing.
Yes, that's the one I had.
It's kind of nice. And I have read, this will be my second read through for this. It may have been my third because the stories seem very familiar, but that's the power of King. Sometimes he just sticks in your mind, and when you start reading it, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. There's a bit of that.
Yeah. I've got a similar story. Like, I feel as if I've sometimes read a King story multiple times, even though it's only been, like you say, twice. But these days it's a lot more problematic because my friends and I back in South Africa, now that we've discovered audiobooks, right, Mark?
Yes.
Does an audiobook actually count? If you
it does count. I still call it reading as well, even though it's an audiobook. Now, and in fact, I consume this as an audiobook. How did you? So audio. So this time, actually, so we can even talk about the audio recording. The version I got was from Audible, and I think there's only one version, so I'm sure with the, we've listened to the same thing. And rather wonderful readings they were, I have to say. We'll talk about the reader as well as we go through this. I think that might be wise. Let's talk about the book, then the audio book, and then whatever adaptations. I think that's probably the best part. Yes. So I just want to mention briefly. I don't think I did this in the past, but there is an intro by Stephen King, read by Stephen King himself. It's kind of interesting, and it's basically an intro about sort of belief, and he talks about as a kid he believed anything he read, and he read Ripley's Believe It or Not, so he believed the center of a golf ball was poisoned, and a dime could get flattened by a train, all this kind of stuff. But one central little thing that he kind of skirts over is, which I thought was interesting, is he talks about he believes the old sort of urban myth or whatever you'd want to call it, where every 7 years all the cells in your body are renewed, so therefore you're a different person every 7 years, tied to the 7-year itch and all that kind of stuff. He talks about that, and he also mentions each set of his stories up to now are published 7 years apart, so he likes to think they're renewals, as it were. Though in fact they are kind of old stories repackaged somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, some of them go way back to 1972.
Indeed.
So like you say, they've repackaged them. It's a little bit scattershot if you compare it to Night Shift, or maybe it's more comparable to Skeleton Crew, because I also felt Skeleton Crew didn't really have a very tight knit feeling to it. But if you look at them individually, they're quite interesting. Of course, there's a poem in there, and there's a story about baseball, which is sort of like a documentary of baseball.
Yeah, it's more it's non-fiction, isn't it? That
non-fiction.
But we might be getting that onto that one tonight, though. We'll be or
no. Well, the first 8 though, I think is completely horror, right, Mark? So
it's completely horror or thriller, at least.
Thriller, yeah. In most cases, horror, but 1 or 2 cases of thrillers.
And he makes this interesting point that these collections come out every 7 years, and he does also make the point that now he has really cleared out all the book stories he's written so far, short stories that he'd want published, and he says if there's ever another collection, and in fact there are other collections following. There'll be wholly new material, which is interesting. He's kind of committed. It feels to me it's almost like when a band does a first album, it's usually all their current material, and the second album is their other current material, but it's their third album is where they have to write the new stuff that no one's heard before, and it feels a bit like after this he's got to the third album when it comes to short stories. All right, let's get into these stories themselves. Dolan's Cadillac, which is a fairly lengthy one. This was first published in June 1985 in a publication called Castle Rock. I think that's what my notes say. Interesting. So I'll have to look into this publication. Anyway, this was read by Rob Lowe. He doesn't introduce himself, and it took I know that voice, and I had to dig around. And it's Rob Lowe. He reads it fairly well. I really enjoy this one, and for some reason I keep thinking it's an earlier book that isn't in this collection that's called Roadwork, which is a completely different story, nothing to do with this. I don't know why I get those two confused. I guess it sounds a bit like it, Roadwork, right? So
because the main character actually in Dolan's Cadillac, he goes to do literal road work, so if you hear the title of the Bachman book Roadwork, of course it makes me think of Dolan's Cadillac as well, because especially since I read this before I read the Bachman books, so I always screwed them up. It makes sense. So
I think this is a very solid one. It's a loner's tale of revenge. This loner's fairly well adjusted. Now, King's got a history of writing things from a one-person point of view as a loner, and if you look at the more intense ones, stuff like Bachman's Rage is an example of the other end of the spectrum of an angry loner. This is a man driven by grief and revenge, somewhat. I'd say more grief, actually. I feel like it's grief rather than anger. He just feels something needs to be done. And it's set around this gangster Dolan, who's like an aging gangster who's obviously doing well, who travels everywhere in his Cadillac because he doesn't like flying, I think is the
that's the reason.
Travels from Vegas to other places, and he kind of starts sketching out this guy's sort of modus operandi, and he's too scared to do it directly. Try and shoot him. He doesn't think he can get away with it, I think, is the concern. So he hatches this plan of, okay, he knows where he travels. What happens if he can do something about that route? And I should mention we're going to have spoilers for all these stories, by the way.
Definitely.
But it doesn't really diminish the pleasure of reading them, I don't think. Even if you knew exactly what's going to happen, there's a real pleasure to reading King stuff. He has a way of getting into people's heads, as we've discussed, right?
Yeah, I've kind of gone on the record, just off mic discussions with other friends, as saying if you do or talk about Stephen King on air without without spoilers, it's not fun. You can't enjoy the discussion. No.
And there's a lot of Kingisms in it. And what I mean by that is sort of his ways of putting things that make you think, oh, yeah, I see. He has a very easy turn of phrase. And even he makes even what feels with other writers would be quite torturous metaphors. He kind of makes them work quite well. And it's kind of cool. I think he just gives you it does feel like you're reading a real thing, a person who really is experiencing this. He's kind of got this way of putting you in people's heads. Was kind of cool when it's a good person, not so cool when it's a bad person. That can be kind of a bit troubling sometimes. So he basically gets this job on this road. He's a teacher, and he talks about his wife was a teacher as well. And it turns out his wife somehow witnessed something that Dolan did and wanted to testify against Dolan, and Dolan just had her killed to stop this. And it seems like this is a pattern with Dolan. He silences people before it gets anywhere, so he keeps running free. It's a little unclear of what he actually does in the book. It's a little clearer, I think, in the movie, which we'll come to. But he kind of is this character that travels in this. But I think in the book they know it's a bulletproof caddy, right? It's a heavily armed caddy, so he knows that. And if he can say, how can I get to him? And what it is essentially is he wants to dig a hole in the road and drive. Once the caddy goes in it, he can then bury Dolan. That's the plan. But he has to have access to all the equipment. He has to have access to being able to shut off the road and turn on the road and all this, that, and the other. And he gets this job on this crew. And he kind of bribes his way into this crew by offering the guy a really expensive watch. And the manager, the crew manager is like really impressed. Thinks he won't last even the end of the day, but he does. He will persist. Willpower alone, he persists, and everyone. Thinks
his obsession carries him through, right, Mark? His obsession with getting Dolan. Yeah.
And there's scenes where he talks about he didn't realize how intense the sun was, and the skin on his head's gone black from burning, not just red but black.
Yeah,
that's how burnt he is, and that's kind of gives you an idea of how sort of focused he is. And essentially, it's fairly. I wouldn't say it was overwritten. It's fairly long. I was not skipping pages or skipping. I listened to all the through and enjoyed it thoroughly. That's how I felt about it. What about you?
Yeah, it's not one of my favorites in the book, but it's because it's more, clinical. In terms of, Stephen King gets into the details, obsessed with details sometimes, right?
Yeah,
so
it's a procedural, isn't it? Right.
Procedural, yeah. If he writes a story without a supernatural element and it's too detailed, I sometimes do become bored. But strangely enough, with this one, I didn't, because I really, since the characterization is so well done, I really wanted to see Dolan get his revenge. And you kind of have the idea that it might not happen, that something might go wrong. And there are a few instances during the scheme where you feel like, it's all up to chance. Right, Mark?
Indeed. So, you think there's at one point Dolan nearly shoots him. But,
exactly.
Just by luck, he doesn't. And also, he has to is he coming today? I've done all this work ready. What's happening? And stuff like that. But essentially, and he has to work out all the physics of a car driving into a hole. How does that
trajectory? Exactly. And he has to
this and that and the other.
This is Stephen King inserting himself into a story a bit. I mean, when he does research for a new book or a story, this is what he does. He gets other people who are in the know, who are experts in their fields, to let him know. So this guy Robinson, right, the protagonist, he's no different.
Yeah, sorry, because I think it's got a different name in the film, so I may have confused. But yeah,
true, isn't it? Yeah, he's only known by his last name, Robinson.
Interestingly, Dolan recognizes who it is pretty much straight away. As soon as he, are you so and so, and it's like, wow, and that kind of takes him aback. And essentially, they're talking while the guy is burying Dolan. Dolan's kind of offering, trying to bribe him. He offers $1 million. And the guy just keeps him talking while he does the burying, right? And he says, "I'll tell you what, if you can scream loud enough, I'll let you out." So he's basically making Dolan do stuff while he fully intends to bury him, right?
Yeah, now this is where you get to the inspiration for the story, which is apparently, if you look at books like The Essential Stephen King or The Stephen King Reader, it's, The Cask of Amontillado by, Poe, Edgar Allan Poe short story, with
yes, I can see that. Now you said it.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little. Essentially, it's and it reminds me of old horror films, like The Tingler.
Yeah.
Scream if you want to. So it's all that.
Yeah.
There's a touch of that too. He cannot escape the bit of the old EC influence, can he?
Now that you mention that, a lot of these stories are actually EC, like short one-off, just premise-based stories with great characterization and King's writing, flair along the way. But still, it's very EC, like you say.
I mean, Night Shift, he's front and center pretty much says that in the intro, EC all the way through. And he talks about how he can inject the EC into his own novels as well. There's certain, there's stuff about the rats in Salem's Lot, for example.
Yeah.
It's basically an EC shorts.
Yeah.
And a lot of horror writers from the 80s did that. James Herbert famously did that in Fog. And the dark and stuff like that. So the rats. So it's kind of a thing for horror writers back then. And I think horror writers still do it, right? Certainly the ones that get into the gore more certainly do. So in the end, he kind of succeeds, and he knows that Dolan's under there, and he's happy. He's finally at peace, and it finishes fair. It's not quite a crash ending, but it's basically he's done his job. End of story, right? That's how it kind of ends.
Yeah. It's sort of like Stephen King sets him up to fail almost. Even though he's obsessed and he's covered all the dotted all the I's and crossed the T's, you still feel like it's not going to work, but then it does. And then I think I was as surprised as Robinson was when it did, but I was satisfied with the way it ended because he gets his revenge, and more, in at the end, Dolan begs for his life. He screams, he ends up, making Robinson feel as if the revenge was worthwhile and that he got, vengeance for his dead wife who died in a car bomb, which is a horrific way to die.
Yes.
Al Capone style. And, good on Robinson for, it's just a tale of revenge, but it's so satisfying because he puts you in this guy's shoes, right, Mark?
Yeah.
And that's why you feel for him.
Yeah, so you just know that Dolan's got away with so much throughout the rest of his life that it's finally come home, it's finally happened, and it's kind of satisfying. And, he lays tarmac over the top and no one knows Dolan's there, and it's kind of the end, right? Now, this was adapted into a film in 2009 with Wes Bentley, who is probably best known as the younger man in American Beauty. He's been in a few things. Should have had a bigger career, in my opinion. I've seen him in a few things, and he's pretty good. But he's the good guy here, Robinson. And Christian Slater is Dolan, a much younger character than the book suggests. And he's got a touch of the Tarantino's about him, this gangster.
Yeah,
he's kind of verbose, well-spoken, erudite, I would say. Explains himself before he kills people. It's all that kind of.
Extremely bigoted and racist.
But, I should mention he's a horrible, horrible racist. He wasn't particularly in the book, but he certainly was in the film, and they made him quite a horrible character.
I think in the book, most of the descriptions came from Robinson, the descriptions of Dolan, I meant,
Yes.
because, and so here, of course, we see Dolan front and center in the movie, Christian Slater, and what he's like. He's so reprehensible, he even shocks his bodyguards.
Yes.
The two, there's a man and a woman in this case, whereas in the book it's two heavy-set men. You never get into their personalities. But one of the bodyguards is more sympathetic, the female one, right? And then you've got the male one who shows sympathy, but only to shock the victims. Because what does Dolan do in the book? What is his profession as a criminal or as a mobster? Mark, he's a human trafficker, right? So
yes, and he is in the film, right?
Yeah, in the film, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, in the film. So in the book, I'm not sure what he does, to be honest.
Yeah, might be
I
involved with
I
the
think
casinos.
his wife witnessed him killing someone.
Yes.
In the book, but in the film, well, it happens in the film, but it's definitely human trafficking. I think Mexicans across the border. So there is that, and basically we see him turn to even worse, which someone suggests to him, which is trafficking children.
Yeah.
Because they're smaller and worth more. It's kind of horrible. But again, while he's a horrible bigot, he's got that Christian Slater kind of charm. Which is interesting, because then it's like, it's not that you ever root for him in any way, but you kind of think, oh, maybe he can talk himself out of this. And Robinson gives him the opportunity, right? I have to say, they do lift quite a lot of the dialogue straight from King, because it works.
A lot of it, especially at the end. Look, Robinson in the movie has a lot of a closer personality, or should I say, a close personal relationship to Dolan than he does in the story, because in the story, like you say, Dolan only remembers him at the very end, who he was. But in this movie adaptation, he encounters him a couple of times, face to face even.
Yeah. At one point, in fact, we do see him considering shooting Dolan, don't we, and getting a gun and everything. But then he sees, I think, either was it the Chinese mafia?
Yes.
Trying to attack him, and he sees that his vehicle is bulletproof. And they don't beat him, and he kills them. So he knows that a gun is out, so he has to think of a different way of doing it. It has to be said, both characters are younger in the film than the book, so it's a little more dynamic for that, and it's more believable that Robinson could get a job on this crew and work through the summer. Not made that much is made about the fact that he gets this job. There's a lot more about his wife. We see flashbacks with his wife, and he misses his wife. And she drives him. And there's also some interaction with a cop saying, "Look, if you help, I think we're close to sort of getting something on Dolan." A sympathetic cop who's keeping him in the loop, right?
Well, that's what makes the ending so different, or a little bit different than the book. Is at the very end, right after all the hard work, and he succeeded in getting his revenge on Dolan, the cop calls him up and says, "We got him. We got Dolan. We got him on the child trafficking rap."
And he's just already buried him, and then it pans away with Robinson just laughing like he might have gone insane. It's that's the implication, or maybe he's just laughing because who cares? He's under the ground now. It doesn't really matter. It's not entirely clear. Did you like the film?
I liked it because of Christian Slater's character, and I liked it a little bit more. This might be blasphemy, but I liked it a little bit more than the story, but for different reasons. It's been a while since I saw Christian Slater in the movie. I used to be a fan in the 1990s.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Slater too, I have to say.
Yeah,
always.
And he delivered a great performance. And Bentley, Wes Bentley's great too. He's got very intense eyes, and when he plays a bad guy, it works. But this time around, his good guy role worked for me as well.
Yeah,
he really sold it.
Really good thrillers, actually, as the bad guy, and it's really good when he does them.
Yeah.
I have to say, this is the second watch for me. I watched this film quite a while ago, not just when it came out, but maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I really liked it when I watched it. I mean, I wouldn't call it top, 10 out of 10.
No,
7, but it's memorable, and I like the original story, and that might be why when I reread it, I thought, I think I've read this more than once, but I'm pretty sure I haven't. It's just because this film it picks up the spirit very well, even though the characters, they're aged differently and there's some different stuff going on. Christian Slater kind of makes it work, but as you say, he's a horrible, horrible racist. And a terrible human being all the way around.
But he sells that really well. He sells that really well. So good on him for, keeping his acting skills. I mean, he's always had them. It's just, I like to see him in a role where he's not an action hero, because then you can really see what he can do acting wise, and in this case, casting him as a villain, I think, was inspired. I mean, apparently it was supposed to be a completely different cast, right, Mark? If you read stuff like...
No, I didn't know that. I did not know.
Yeah. If you read stuff like IMDb, they say Sylvester Stallone was originally slated to play Dolan. And
that would have been
Kevin
a bigger
Bacon.
Budget and bigger marketed film entirely, wouldn't
that's
it?
right.
Yes.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon was going to be Robinson, so I don't know. They passed on it, but I think Stephen King properties also work regardless of who's acting in it if they stick very closely to the source material and make a little bit of a change maybe at the end. Not because King's endings don't work, but because they want to give the Stephen King fans and the viewers something extra. Not completely change it, but just give them something extra.
Quite a lot of his adaptations where there's a tweak here and there. The tweaks are often to the benefit of the film. They got that filmic shortcutting going on, and that wasn't needed in this film. It was fine as it was. They added a bit which added to the sort of ambiguity, though. It was clear that Dolan really needed to suffer for what he did. But in the book, he's we know over the years he's been getting away with so much. Whereas this Dolan, it's like we don't know what he's got away with or not, and whether he's just been lucky. But he killed this man's wife, so therefore he needs to be punished, right? That's Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's the first one. Pretty decent story. Not bad. Very memorable, I have to say, given this was the second reading. Read well by Rob Lowe as well.
Yeah, great reading by Rob. So, yeah, I agree, Mark. I'll give this a pretty high score, I think, as King's short stories go, because without the supernatural element, still managed to entertain me and horrify me at turns. Yeah, especially indeed. The death at the end. So, yeah, I would not want to die like that.
No, that's pretty horrible, isn't it? Or starving and dehydrated, I should imagine. I don't know if he actually got crushed. I assume not, because that was a pretty sturdy car. I think he was just encased in that coffin of a car, really.
Yeah, forever, yeah. And he died insane, in the story at least. He went insane. So horrible way to die, with brief bursts of sanity every now and then.
Yes, indeed. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now, the next story is called The End of the Whole Mess. This was first published in October 1986 issue of Omni of all things. Again, an interesting one. This time on the audiobook read by Matthew Broderick, who does a great job. Interestingly, I couldn't think of a connection with Matthew Broderick and King, though Rob Lowe, was Nick in The Stand, the TV.
Yeah, he's got a connection,
the older version of The Stand here. So Rob Lowe's got a connection. And there may be others. I'm trying to think, was he in the same resort remake? Anyway, Matthew Broderick has not got the connection. Again, a fine piece of reading from Broderick. I thought it was really presented quite well. Okay, so this one involves... It's basically a first-person narrative where a guy's telling us about his brother who was kind of a genius. I mean, they're obviously a highly intelligent family. From what he gives us the family background, no one in the family is a slouch, but this guy, his brother, who was Bobby, is like on another level, right? But he doesn't concern himself with a certain career or anything. He concerns himself with bigger picture stuff. And as the story evolves, we get their family life, and we hear how Bobby's kind of depressed about the state of the world. Everyone's kind of, there's terrorism and violence and bigotry all over, and he's trying to figure out a way of resolving it. And he's identified as a certain area where issues don't happen, which is kind of interesting. It's a certain area in Texas, using statistics and sort of computer tech and stuff like that and maps, they kind of work out that violent crime doesn't really exist in a certain area. Certainly as you get towards the middle of this area, it gets less and less and less. There's a specific thing, and it becomes and he thinks it's the water. It's something in the water. You know, that old phrase. And basically they've worked out there's something in the water that reduces aggression. And they figure out a way. They're not quite sure what it is, but they figure out a way to concentrate it and start producing it. This weird chemical, whatever it is. It's interesting idea, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. This is one of those stories where it seems that King is trying out something other than horror, right, Mark? He's trying out a bit of a drama, a bit of a science fiction maybe. And then at the end, again, he inserts a heavy dose of horror at the very end. But of a different flavor, though. Horror of a different kind. Yeah. It's more.
And essentially, Bobby realizes a certain volcano is going to blow at a certain time. And if they get enough of the water in the volcano, it will spread around the world and cause everyone to be exposed to it. This special concentrated form, which is an interesting idea. It's like a calmative, it's I don't know, anti-testosterone, or I don't know what it is. And it is interesting. We even see he demonstrates by putting a small drop on a wasp's nest, doesn't he? And he says the bees don't sting because it kills them. They're invested. They try not to sting. They only sting if they really have to. Wasps just sting all the time. And he equates the human race to wasps, doesn't he? The way they are, which is kind of a fair analogy. But he puts a tiny drop of this water in it and opens the wasp nest and gets no sting, or gets a few stings, but very few, right? Where it should be covered. Also, Bobby's concerned that we're approaching nuclear war. So this was a kind of thing in the 70s and 80s, wasn't it? There was always that. Yeah. It's weird now thinking about that. We don't think about that anymore. There's other concerns, isn't there? There's environment. But nuclear war was everyone's minds, probably in the 60s and certainly in the 70s and 80s when I was around. It was just assumed at some point it may happen, right?
Yeah, true, yeah.
So Bobby was concerned about that. And then we find out that the Earth then settled down to a golden period where everyone was peaceful and there wasn't any conflicts and productive. But then they figured out the chemical did something else. It basically turned people into sort of idiots. Is that the right word? I'm not sure.
Gave them... Right. Yeah, almost. Yeah, it gave them a advanced case of super Alzheimer's, right, Mark? So in most cases, and especially since the water they distributed through that volcano in Borneo or wherever was in its concentrated form, so it was it had a much quicker effect or much stronger effect than the regular water from that La Plata place in Texas. So everybody within a year, I think it was, they became they started to lose, their memories. Cognitive abilities, yeah. So that is where the horror came in, because everybody started turning into these drooling, like you say, idiots walking around and disturbing. That's kind of a different apocalypse than we normally get.
Indeed. It's quite unique. And Bobby and his brother Howard kind of figured this out and go to bottled water, don't they? Protected water as a way of trying to slow it down. But in the end, Bobby takes a full dose, and Howard does too, his brother. But writes out this journal as he's going, and basically towards the end of the story, starts writing down gibberish. Right.
Yeah. Yes. That is the most disturbing part for me. Is it's also done in some other King stories, especially the survivor type from Skeleton Crew, if you might remember, where the guy was hopped up on cocaine and he started to eat himself. Stuck on that island.
What a story! That was EC through and through, wasn't it?
That was amazing, and it happens in this one too. Where at the very end, like you say, he's still keeping the journal, still trying to write down everything that happened, but he starts losing his vocabulary, he starts losing the train of his thoughts, and he starts breaking down. Very similar to Flowers for Algernon.
Yeah,
Daniel
Daniel
Keyes.
Keyes' book, yes.
Yeah.
Which King quite likes that book. I'm aware of it. I think he talked about it in Dance Macabre.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So, yeah, you can see he was kind of influenced by that. Again, a good, fairly short, given how much was packed into it, and a nice punchy story, very memorable.
Yeah, I think it works because this is sort of a bit of an alternate version of King's own childhood and life with his brother David. You know, he I think it was in where was it? It was probably in Danse Macabre, where he had this short introduction to his childhood. And then he mentioned that his brother was always very smart, much smarter than he was. He fiddled around with transistor radios. He started like a printing company in when he was still in junior high, and figured out how to build his own printing press and all of that. So his brother David was very smart, and little Stevie King was always he always admired him, followed him around, and then a similar thing happened in the story because the narrator also a writer, right, Mark? And just like Stephen King became his brother, interested in science but couldn't lock down one specific field. He was jumping around all over the place, similar to King's brother. And I think that's also what makes the story powerful, is these two brothers who loved each other end up causing the end of the world.
Yes,
essentially
through love and wanting things to be better. Now, interestingly, there was a TV adaptation of this, which I have covered quite recently in my one of my other podcasts, which is Anthologic. It was one of the installments of a short series called Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which we should be talking about all the time, really, for this. It was the fourth of the. It was a single season show. It was the fourth episode. I did watch the first episode a couple of years back and cover it on Anthology. Not great. It was okay, but it wasn't great. This one, on the other hand, was very good. I thought this has Ron Livingston, right, as Howard.
Yeah, Ron Livingston as Howard, and who is it? Elliot from
Henry
from
Thomas.
E.T.
Yes.
Yeah,
Henry
I always call him Elliot.
Who does he have a connection with King? He did the Dark Half.
Dark Half. Yeah. I think it was the Dark Half.
I'm not sure. He does have some connections with King. So it's these two. That show aired in 2006. Now, I think there's only 8 episodes of this series, and a lot of them aren't from Nightmares and Dreamscapes. They're from other works, but this one was. And I thought he was. There was some interesting. The way they did it was very true to the story, right? It was pretty much the story. To be. Other than he wasn't a writer, was he, Howard? He was a documentarian, so his log was a video log instead of a written log, which totally works for a visual medium like TV.
Exactly, works much better. Yeah, there's also a very heartfelt moment where they have to sort of their parents, who were both very smart people. They both had the part of the Mensa Club, right? Like they mentioned, they had this heartfelt scene in the movie where. Howard goes to take care of his folks who are now under the influence of this water and losing themselves. And that's very scary. I mean, anybody who has a parent or worried about they might get Alzheimer's would feel the horror there, and also feel the dread that might engender.
Indeed, it definitely touched sort of phobic points, as King calls them, much more so than the written story, in fact, I would say. Also, it references 9/11 as one of the motivators for Bobby's sort of depression with the humankind. Right. So instead of like nuclear war, it's more about what are we doing to each other through this and stuff like that. Very effective. Ron Livingston was good. Henry Thomas was good, and it was put together really well. I think this. I haven't seen the other episodes, but from reading the reviews, this was considered the best episode of the series. I'm not surprised; it's very good. So
same here.
Recommend. Yeah. Okay, so pretty decent story, punchy. Got on with it. Quite sad at the end. It did remind me of another King story, but I can't. There's another one. I'm trying to think.
About the end of the world, or about them
maybe it's the one that's a bit like a side story to The Stand I'm thinking of. Maybe it's just that.
Oh, yeah, it's the one. Is it the one where I think it's in one of his newer collections, isn't it? Where This I think it's a motorcycle, right? A guy who's heavily into motorcycles, and he's I don't know what the name is, but it's in what was it called? He drives off during the
Everything's
stand.
eventual, maybe.
Oh, okay. Also in Everything's Eventual. Yeah, I think one of the very recent ones though had another story like that, but
I
it
haven't
might be
read
in
those,
Everything's
so
Eventual.
yeah, no.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll cover it eventually, right, Mark?
The thing
We'll
is,
get
it
to it.
may be I'm just remembering this story again. It might be it's this story that I'm thinking that it's similar to the story itself. Okay,
Possible.
right. Yeah, so solid. Okay, the next story is called Suffered the Little Children. Goes back a fair bit. This was actually first published in 1972 in Cavalier.
Yeah.
And it's a nasty little EC kind of thing, isn't it? It's about a third grade teacher who isn't the nicest teacher. She kind of knows how to terrify and manipulate the children and watch them and basically keep them cowed, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She's kind of like that. I have to say, this is read by Whoopi Goldberg. Very nice reading again.
Yeah, another one that's good. You see why these actors make it. It's not just based on their on-screen presence. They've also got this kind of gravitas to their delivery, and their voices.
Oh yeah, they definitely know how to project drama and character, for sure.
Definitely.
So essentially, she notices she gets the notion one of her students is not quite right. There's something in the corner of her eye, isn't it? And
little Robert.
Yeah, and she kind of starts treating him differently in a not particularly nice way for a teacher of a third grade. But then he kind of he says, "Do you want to see me change?"
Yeah. So he surprises her by actually, it turns out that what she feared is the truth. Well, the story is very ambiguous, right, Mark? We don't know if this is all in her mind, if she's going insane, or if there is actually something supernatural connected to little Robert. But yeah, he does confirm her fears, right, and her paranoia by saying these things to her in private, which others are never privy to,
Yeah.
And that.
It's a fear of children. We've seen this in Children of the Corn, haven't we, for example?
Yeah.
And there's other films like and stories, Midwich Cuckoos or Village of the Damned, things like that.
Now, you guys on United Nations Follow the podcast, you must have covered this in the past. I'm sure I listened to it in the past. I can't remember specific instances, but the evil child, subgenre of horror. This is a prime example of that. It's also
we have talked about it, but I can't remember the context either. Things like children shouldn't play with dead things, that kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah. So great example of that subgenre, I want to say. It's very reminiscent to a Ray Bradbury short story. Now I can't think of the name. It's The Little Assassin or The Small Assassin or something, where the child sort of turns on his parents. Here it's the student. A good student, like she mentions in the beginning, right, Mark? Hardly any problems from him in the past. Suddenly turning on the teacher, but justifiably so, because she's a horrible person. Good teacher, but horrible to the students, like you say.
Horribly manipulative and unsympathetic. Yeah. She's more proud of the fact she can keep them terrified than how much she teaches them, right?
Yeah,
she sees discipline and control as the root of teaching rather than passing knowledge. It feels like she's not great. And talking of the Bradbury influence, it definitely feels like a Bradbury story. Now King does like a bit of Bradbury. He talks about it again in Danse Macabre quite extensively, and for sure you could feel the influence of something like Something Wicked This Way Comes on something like It, right?
Definitely.
One of Bradbury's key novels, Something Wicked This Way Comes. And also his short stories. He likes the short story form, as does King. So there's an awful lot of very good short stories by Ray Bradbury that you can go through, and there's some interesting. The Illustrated Man.
That's got his best stuff. It's prime short stories of Bradbury. Yeah.
And certainly when King ventures into a more sci-fi element, it feels a bit like Bradbury. It certainly has got a similar feel. Anyway, she gets freaked out by this kid, but then gets convinced more and more the children are kind of like this, right?
Yeah. It's sort of as if Robert's evil is contagious, right, Mark? It starts with him, and then more of the children start reacting like him to Miss Sidley's threats, and it's all, like you say, a very Village of the Damned-esque, scenario. And I love that.
Yeah, and she basically takes the children that she thinks might be problematic to a room with a Luger. She finds she's got an old war Luger from somewhere, isn't she? She kind of wants to shoot them.
The way you said that, she takes them to a room with a Luger.
What happens?
That could be a short story. You should write that short story, Mike. Mark, the room with the Luger, being a writer yourself.
Yeah. So I took the child to the room with the Luger. That is the opening sentence. Yeah. So she does try and shoot. She just shoot them, doesn't she? Actually, thinking about it.
Yeah.
And
she
gets committed. I think, is it Juniper Hill? I can't remember if we're
Juniper Hill, exactly, where Henry Bowers in It ended up, and a couple of other King characters. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they allow her to work with preschoolers for therapy, which sounds bizarre. I don't feel that would ever happen. And then they kind of watching her weirdly. Basically, it's implied that they're the same, and she commits suicide. And then a psychiatrist who's covering the case kind of is with the children, and it's kind of implied he's getting the feeling too. It's going on and on.
So that's a great ending. Another great ending where people who sometimes knock King for his endings have got it completely wrong. If you look at percentage-wise, right, Mark, I'd say most of his endings really hit hard and hit well. And
I think the problem, his weaker endings are sometimes at the end of his longest books, so it feels much more impactful as a weak ending than it should otherwise do. Or it may be it's an appropriate ending, and if it was a shorter book, it would be fine. But for some reason, you want some sort of grand, massive ending. So it could be a bit of that. Yeah, I like this one. Again, honestly, I don't really have any faults with this one. It's a punchy little horror story, right?
Yeah. Well, King used to be a teacher. Now, I don't think he ever taught elementary school, primary school as we know it. He might have, I think, only taught junior or senior high. But, if you think about any teacher goes through, well, presumably, since my parents are teachers as well, they go through that time where, they hate their jobs, and they don't hate their students. But, especially in elementary school, I think if you're not, Miss Sidley is childless, so she's not a particular fan of children. So she's more prone to hate them. She definitely treats them as objects of hate. Right, Mark. So that's why I think King, being a teacher himself, he probably put himself in a what if scenario. Like what if I, went into elementary school and started to hate my charges? What would I do? And he takes it to the extreme. Like you say, she fakes a test, right? Or she tells the kids that they're going to have a test, and they have to meet her one by one in the soundproofed music room, I think it is, or so that the shots from her brother's Luger that she had doesn't resonate through the school hall. So that's how she kills. That is very macabre and very disturbing, and it shows that King thought about this in detail, which the fact that he was a teacher makes this even more horrific. That he actually thought about
I was wondering if he ever considered pulling this story, because he pulled Rage, which is a book rather than a short story in a collection.
Well,
because
Mark,
it was about high school shootings, wasn't it? And this kind of feels like a murderous teacher. It's a bit too near what happens sometimes.
Yeah. It is very close. It has happened. School shootings, and being what they are, they've always been a thing in America. Yes. Just more so now because it's been being publicized more. But back then there were many instances. So you're right. This is a very touchy subject. But I'm just of the mind that if King didn't pull the story dedication then he won't pull any story.
Indeed. Yes. Good right.
If he didn't pull that scene from It. Yeah, sorry. I'm jumping the gun here. Pardon the pun.
Let's move on to the next story. Night Flyer, again, published in 72. Oh, no, sorry, I've got wrong notes there. I'm not sure when it was published. Sorry, I think I've made a mistake with my notes. But this one was read by Frank Muller, who, as an actor, I can't place him, but it was a great reading. It really was effective. This centers on a really horrible piece of work who's a tabloid journalist. Right?
Yeah.
This is King having a go at tabloid journalism. As well, it has to be said. Now, this character Dees also appears in Dead Zone, I believe.
Yeah, he does.
Very briefly.
And the paper he works for, right, Mark? What's it in the Inside View or
Inside View? It's a really scummy paper, right?
Exactly. It appears in, I think, many works of King as well. I mean, while I was reading up on the stories and doing some research, this particular paper, I can't remember the exact instances where they mention it, but it appears in quite a few. So it's very good. I mean, I wouldn't be able to conceive of myself as a writer with such a large body of work being able to focus on these details. I mean, King sometimes does credit his researchers, right? Folks that he employs to help him to research some of his works so that, he can keep the details straight. But I'm sure in this case he did it all by himself. He kept this inside view, very similar to like things like Castle Rock and Juniper Hill and what we've mentioned. He keeps it in multiple stories, which is universe building on a very large scale.
I've got some notes here about where it's mentioned. Now I don't remember it mentioned in any of these, and I haven't read them all, so that might be it. But it's probably in there in the background. Desperation, Insomnia, Dark Tower 3. I don't remember this in Dark Tower 3, but it may be in the background. Bag of Bones, Needful Things. Again, don't remember it in Needful Things. Doctor Sleep, From a Buick 8, and Elevation. So it is part of the Kingverse, for sure.
Right.
But this character, Dees, is terrible. He's kind of presented as a psychopath, and I mean that in a clinical way. He kind of knows how to charm people, but he doesn't feel it. He has to fake it. And he doesn't understand why it works, but he knows it does. So he's got a psychopathic trait to him as well.
Agreed.
And it's all about this weird. I think his editor has spotted there's this weird pattern of murders when a certain plane lands and stuff like that, and he kind of puts it together as soon as he hears what the guy who's flying the plane calls himself, Dwight Renfield, who that's Renfield. Obviously, he's from Dracula, but Dwight Fry played one of the early Renfields in the Bela Lugosi classic.
Yeah.
Dwight Fry is my favourite Renfield too, but he kind of knew that this guy was having he thought that the guy is someone who thinks they're a vampire. That was his thinking, right? And he knew how much his audience would love it, especially if he got some gory pictures to go along with it. He's also proud of his photographic skills, wasn't he? This guy, he was kind of the story's nothing without a picture was kind of his view. So he starts kind of following the killer's trail. He kind of starts getting uneasy as he realizes this guy somehow charmed an elderly couple and stayed there a day before he killed them. That's a bit weird, right? And he ends up also he can fly himself. He's got his own plane. So they're flying from airport to airport, kind of looking for each other. So he finally catches up with him, and there's been carnage. I mean, it's again properly Grand Guignol stuff. This is properly EC stuff. He's basically decimated people at this airport. And at that point, Dees realised, this isn't a guy who thinks he's a vampire.
This might be the actual thing.
There's a scene which is properly funny but gruesome. Where
in the bathroom,
he's in the bathroom. He looks in the mirror and he sees blood urine appearing into a urinal with no one there. So the vampire's taking a passing
he's
water.
Taking a whiz, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's looking at it through the mirror, the bathroom mirror, right, Mark? But he's too scared to look back. Once he sees this blood urine starts to flow, and then, that's where he has his one and only confrontation with the Night Flyer. And it's suitably realistic to make these completely overturn his belief system, which was so far being like just psychopaths roaming the countryside, assuming roles of monsters. This is the actual real, item standing right behind him, whispering in his ear.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the vampire's kind of happy that he exists because he calls him, "You're my would-be biographer."
Yeah.
He wants to let this person exist as a witness to what he's done. He's kind of proud of himself, this vampire, is how it feels.
That's right.
And he kind of goes off, but Dees is utterly shaken by all of this.
Yeah.
So a good little story.
Yeah. I mean, the ending, we should mention it because it's going to be different from the ending we're going to discuss, the movie adaptation, right, Mark? Basically, it just ends with sort of the vampire framing Dees as the Night Flyer himself. Because he abandons Dees in this airport full of mutilated corpses, and then the police show up, and then Dees has to explain himself. He's got a plane. He's the perfect shill or the perfect stand-in for the Night Flyer.
So not only does he like having a witness, he wants someone set up to take the fall. Right, that's kind of the implication. Exactly. It's slightly different in the film. Now, the film was made in 1997 with Miguel Ferrer as Dees. Now, perfect casting for such a character, right? Miguel Ferrer.
I mean, think about RoboCop, right, Mark? Doesn't that spring to mind? Miguel Ferrer's character.
Yeah, and even when he plays a good character like Albert in Twin Peaks, he's
a little bit sly, cunning.
He's abrupt. He's abrupt.
Yeah, very abrupt, very in your face, kind of. Yeah, I agree. The way he says his lines, the way he enunciates certain phrases is reminiscent of someone who's incredibly rude and incredibly unfeeling, unsympathetic kind of character, even in his good roles, like you say. So perfect casting, because this guy Richard Dees is one of King's most reprehensible, I think, characters. He's just there for the story. He's willing to tread all over everybody, to get his pictures. And King's good at writing characters like those.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of uncomfortable reading that character, but you kind of, and he sneers at pretty much everyone he deals with. He's highly manipulative. But he's got a saying, isn't he? It's like, never believe what you publish. I never publish what you believe. I don't know why that makes any sense, to be honest.
I mean, it's used again at the end to no effect. It just doesn't really have that impact. I think that the script writer, I don't know who wrote the script. I don't think it's Stephen King. I'm pretty sure it's not. But it doesn't have that impact that I think they were going for with that line. I think it doesn't work. No. So.
Now, in this one, his editor also assigns a more junior reporter who's a woman. And Dees is really not impressed, is he? No. He wants to do it on his own. Basically says no. However, she kind of gets entwined in it all backwards and forwards, and he kind of offers to share the work with her while not really wanting to share the title at all, right? That's not his intention at all. So Dees kind of investigates the stories. He kind of, again, it sticks, apart from the female reporter being in the plot, it sticks pretty closely to the original. And the addition of the female reporter does not interfere with that anyway. It works quite well, actually. But when I read what this was about before I watched it, I thought, oh, this sounds like it's going to be jarring. But no, I thought it was pretty smooth. What do you think?
Yeah, I like this a lot. I didn't well, this was my first watch, I should say, Mark, after you made me aware of the existence of this. I don't know. There was a period in the 90s where I sort of eschewed watching any King adaptations. I don't know why. I just got tired of the the repeated failures. It felt like it was going in a very B movie-esque, direction. The King adaptations, I should say, of the 1990s. I'm not talking about Needful Things here. Needful Things was the last, I think, the good one that I watched in the 1990s. I meant, of course, there's been many other good ones after that. But I think from maybe 1994 to 2002, that was during my transition to Asia. When I sort of left the West behind and came to Asia. Stephen King's not very big over here, not as big as he is in the West. So you don't get everything in the video stores or in the blockbusters over here that you would get back home. So I think that's the reason I missed a lot of the Stephen King movies of that time, and also other horror movies. There was a huge gap. So when you made me aware of this, I was surprised, because what was 1997, right? So that falls square in that period for me. So I watched it, and I've since watched it a second time, because you and we've been discussing this recording for a while, so I've had the time, and I quite liked it, because this is probably the most gruesome vampire I've ever seen. Vampire.
It's very gruesome.
Yeah.
The last act is really wow.
It's a bloodbath.
It really is. This vampire
splatterpunk
is about as far away from like Twilight as you can imagine, probably. Right?
Which is very firmly in line with Stephen King's belief in vampires, right? He hates the Twilight franchise as well.
Yeah. So, you it should be Nosferatu, not sort of emo teens. It just doesn't work that way. No. I really like this version of Vampire. It's kind of horrific. It's really now I do find that some horror at some point in the late 80s, horror did kind of turn a lot grimmer. The earlier in the 80s, the horror was a lot more fun, and it got kind of a point it was grim. Some of the 90s do it really well, like Hellraiser and so on, and some don't. And this, while it was grim, I thought it kept the line. It was like, this is too much. There was none of that. This was fine, but it was shockingly sort of grim, actually.
Yeah, it was. Especially there's no
effects too, right? So,
that was great. All practical, nothing. And they did have the digital technology at this time, rudimentary kind of digital. They didn't go for that. They kept it in the horror vein, inspired by Tom Savini probably, and they made it work. Especially the vampire we've spoken about, right, Mark? But the corpses at the end scattered throughout that airport. That looked horrific. I mean, it looked unrealistic, but not badly done at all. It looked like what a supernatural creature might be able to do to a human body, and then it became even more horrific at the end, where with the change they made. It's similar. It's almost on the level of let's say The Mist, the movie adaptation of The Mist with Thomas Jane. The twist ending at the end. Even though you don't feel anything for the character of Dees, so it's not on that level. But you know what I mean? There is a twist ending at the very end to give us something extra for the Stephen King fan. So it was not predictable for me at all. Having this being my first watch, I know the story, I know the way it ended. This completely surprised me and made it even more enjoyable.
Yeah, indeed. And also, it becomes basically Dees, again, is the killer, but this time set up by the female reporter who specifically sees the vampire kind of leave, but still reports it as if Dees was the killer, even though she knows better, following his mantra of never believe what you publish and never publish, which again still doesn't really make sense to me as a way of reporting. It suggests you only ever publish lies. That's what that suggests.
Yeah.
So that seems a bit silly. Why would you? If it's a good truth, why not go with it, right?
I mean, and also since she sees herself as a real reporter in the beginning, and then Dee sort of corrupted her with his, ways, and also she wanted revenge on him because she was a fairly pleasant character in the beginning, very optimistic, and then it seems that within the short period of time, the editor also had a hand in this. She became an early prototype of let's say an early Dees,
she's become Dees. Yeah, indeed. I enjoyed both the story and the film. The film is surprisingly good, given you think, is this going to work? Is this going to be? And it is a B movie. There's no doubt about that, but in a good way.
It's a B movie in a good way.
It's an exploitation movie, and it's fun because Miguel Ferrer really helps make it work, and the cheer. They really went with it with his vampire in that last act, and it kind of works because of that, right? It's just wow. Exactly. Okay. So I quite enjoyed it. Like you, I quite enjoyed it. And this was the first watch for me. Okay, the next story is Popsy. This one's read by Joe Montana. Really good reading, again.
Excellent. I mean, the way he does the child's voice, right, Mark? That is the creepiest, little kid's voice.
Yeah, he does it really well. Now, I do know Joe Montana's reading from other King works. He did the audio version of Thinner, and it was a great reading. It has to be said, that was a great reading.
I've never listened to that. Now I'm going to have to listen to that, Mark. Because
Joe Montana really makes it work. I mean, it's quite a good book anyway. I quite like Thinner.
Oh, yeah, I'm a fan, yeah.
But he works because one of the reasons is, I think, the gangster character in Thinner, he does him really well. It's Joe Montana, right? He just does it really well. But he does the other voices well too. But it really solidifies it when he brings that gangster voice to the gangster in Thinner too. Anyway,
I'll have a listen.
This one is, again, a horribly reprehensible character doing horrible things, but getting his comeuppance, right? This guy is basically, I think his name's Sheridan.
Yes.
He's basically a gambler, and he's lost a lot of money. And basically, it starts with him sort of describing how he'd lost something he could not pay back, and he knew he was going to get broken bones or worse. And the man who's got the marks on him says, well, I'll tell you what, if you think you can pay it back, you go see, is it Mr. Wizard?
Mr. Wizard, this Turk, right? Turkish
this Turk. And he says he can sort of give you a job that allow you to pay you back. And it is basically abducting children. So it's kind of grim, right? It's kind of
very grim. Yeah, and that sort of ties it together with the Dolan adaptation, not the story itself, but there's some weird connectivity here, right, Mark? Just from us discussing it, because that is one of the ultimate horrors, is the children being victimized, and here it's done really well, by King. I think King sort of pointed us to this in an earlier day when it wasn't much publicized, the whole child trafficking thing, especially since I'm here in Asia. That's a big deal. It's a very big deal. So good on King for dealing with all of these issues. And we've only gone through 5 of the stories so far. So he's already dealt with lots of apocalyptic or lots of touchy subjects, I should say.
Yes. So basically, Sheridan does not want to know what happens with the children. He doesn't want that on his it is on his conscience, but he just doesn't want to know what happens. The Turk Mr. Wizard just says, they go on a boat ride. So basically, it's about his expertise in abducting children. He knows where to go, where to look, how to sort of get them. And with this, he meets this little kid, and he's sort of saying, "I can help you, kid. Do you want me to help you?" And like the kids, if he sees the kid's nervous, he'll say, "Well, okay, kid, I'll leave you to it then." And manipulating the children to sort of go with him. And the kid does eventually get into his van, and he says, we go to McDonald's. And the kid says, but what about my Popsy? What about Popsy? And he's like, oh yeah, he's here at this place, we'll go there. But he goes, Popsy doesn't go to McDonald's, and it's all that kind of. So it's all a bit weird, but he's just too nervous. He just wants to get this kid somewhere, and get his money, basically, because he keeps gambling stuff away, right? He's better at gambling. That he has to keep doing this, right? So in the end, he gets the kid, and he handcuffs the kid. But the kid's kind of pretty strong, and he bites. Yeah, and he bites the guy, doesn't he?
Yeah, he almost rips open his hand, just from a small bite. And then he starts to notice the kid's teeth, his pale complexion, and the fact that he smells like battery acid when he sweats.
Yeah,
there's all these little details.
An acidic smell. And also he talks about Popsy will be able to find him. And Popsy, there's a reference that Popsy can fly. So that just gets weirder and weirder. So essentially, night falls, and this guy notices there's a weird shape above him, and the boy says, "That's Popsy." And then basically the windshield gets covered, and then there's a weird bat-like creature who basically cuts open Sheridan's throat and drains the blood gives the blood to the child, right?
Invites the kid for a drink.
Yeah. So
now
it's a vampire story again.
It's a vampire story again, following right off of the Night Flyer, right?
Yeah.
So
and also King has stated apparently that the Night Flyer might actually be Popsy.
I don't know if I like that much, Mark. I mean, it's fine. It's King. It's King's own universe. It's too much connectivity for me. Why? Seeing the Night Flyer who takes all these jaunts across the country, then turn up to get his grandson Transformer toys. I don't know. It's weird.
It sounds weird. I mean, it'd probably work better if they were in different collections, because it's like, it's quite a connection. But when it's one story right after the other, and you say they're connected, and there's no other connection other than they're both vampires, it doesn't feel quite right. And they're werewolf acting.
Yeah.
However, I did really like the story.
Me too.
It's kind of fun and kind of interesting, and let's hope this happens to all child abductors. Actually, personally,
definitely.
So that's kind of cool.
Okay, that's what makes it so effective, right, Mark? Because you've got the easy tale again, where they set up the bad guy really well, and then when the bad things happen, classic.
A bad guy comes a cropper by under sort of not judging who he's confronting well enough. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So the next story I thought was an interesting bit of a departure. This one was called It Grows on You, written again very early, published in 1973 for, I believe, like a university publication. Where he was a student, called Marshlands. He did rewrite this a little to make it more to what he wanted. It's about Castle Rock. It's his goodbye tale to Castle Rock, pretty much. So he wanted it for that, so he rewrote it to correspond. Now, this was read by King himself.
Yeah.
What do you think? How do you think he did?
I'm not a big fan of King reading his stuff. I'm not saying I hate it, you know what I mean, Mark, but the way King reads it, if you compare it to the rest of the folks reading his books, it's not always my favorite. In fact, I have turned down, buying audiobooks on Audible if I see King reads the entire book. But when he reads a short story, I don't particularly mind. And I think he did really well. It's a very personal, like you say, story connected to him personally, in the sense that, this is his creation, Castle Rock, that he's saying goodbye to, at least, like you say, in the rewrite, when he rewrote the story. But I not as good as the rest. I don't know. There's something about King's delivery.
Sorry, go on.
I don't know how to describe it, Mark. His voice is incongruous. It's always been incongruous for me with the fact that he's Stephen King. It doesn't sound like a horror writer's voice.
It always works to me, because I think I heard him in early days. So I've kind of always, it's never been a problem. Now, I quite like this, because I think it's King was reading in his strongest area, which is a Maine setting, talking about small town stuff.
Yeah,
so that works for me. And this is really about small town stuff, like the old timers at the barbers and stuff like that, and all of that's kind of fine. And it's his least clear story. And what I mean by that is it kind of is ambiguous about what it's actually about, and it's only until right at the end you think you know what it's about, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this was a difficult one for me to listen to on an audiobook too. I think if I had done the reread, I've reread the collection twice in my life, but this time around I went for the audiobook, and I've also listened to the audio twice as well, Mark. So this marks my fourth time. But this is one of those stories that doesn't work for me on audio. So in fact, I had to go back and quickly read through the story this time around as well, just to make sure I've got everything clear. And even now, I'm not sure I've got everything exactly clear. I mean, it's essentially about this old house.
I feel like it was King's. He was fairly young when he wrote this. It was King's take on the Shirley Jackson's way of describing the Haunting of Hill House, right?
Yeah.
That's how it felt, and not as successful at all, actually. Now, it's interesting when King mimics other writers. I find it quite successful usually. He's got a great Lovecraftian story in the second collection, for example. Can't remember what it's called, but it's a base. I think
Crouch End, maybe.
It was called Jerusalem's Lot. That's right.
Oh, that's from Night Shift.
Jerusalem's the first
Lot.
collection.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So that's fine, but this one felt like a failed version of Shirley Jackson's take on the bad place. That's kind of how it felt. And it was kind of a little unclear what was going on, to be honest, other than describing this house. And I think it's also written as like someone telling a story of stuff, and there was a lack of focus about what was story and what was background. Some of Lovecraft's weaker stories are like that too.
Yeah,
you're kind of not quite sure what the story's about because there's so much other incidental stuff going on, and this I think suffered a bit from that.
I agree. I mean, there isn't any real character development or focus because it's just the narrator recounting events. So you can't follow a character. You kind of have to look at a vast a variety of characters over a vast span of time, to get a sense of the history of this house and how with every murder or everything associated with the house, every death that it causes. I mean, it's not the house directly causing it. That's never implied. But when a death happens connected to whoever's owning this house, an extra room, the house keeps expanding, an extra room gets built on. That's basically essentially the horror behind the whole story. But it's never directly stated, right, Mark? You sort of, like you say, it's very ambiguous. You have to think for yourself what might be the cause of this, and it seems to just be, like you say, evil seeped into the masonry and the floorboards of this house, and it's now associated with the town. The town associated with a part of its history that it would rather forget. And yet the reminder is there, and how it impacts the folks of the town to have to live with this horrific piece of architecture.
Yeah, it's surprisingly diffuse for King. Given it's about old evils precipitating, right? It's about a woman that molested men when they were boys, and how they then die because of this, or the associations there. So it's like, well, why would victims become the story be
extra
about
rooms.
how the victims dying, victims of something dying. So it's not like who was the ancient evil succeeded here, right? Or something. It's a bit odd, and it's kind of, I liked it. I like the small town stuff. I like the first half better than the second half, in fact. And I quite like King's reading of that small town stuff. But it's the actual story's weak, I think.
Yeah, I agree. But and yet the story won a prize, right, Mark? The rewritten version that appeared, I think, won like some kind of a prize for that year that it was released.
Yeah, maybe we've just not seen some of the others do, and it may be the reading. This might work better as read rather than listened to. But as you say, you read it and it still didn't quite work for you, right?
Yeah. I don't remember how I felt the very first time I read it. I think I was on such a Stephen King high that I might have, given this a pass. I mean, I definitely read it the first time way back when. I just like, okay, Stephen King can do no wrong. So even though I might not have understood the story, maybe I'm not smart enough yet or something like that. But now, 20 years after the fact, or what, more than 20 years, 30 years afterwards, still not quite getting it. So
yeah, and I have to say, of the 8 we're going to be discussing tonight, this is the least memorable to me. It's like when I looked at the title, it's like, I don't remember what that's about, and it's like, yeah, it's that one. And like I say, I like the small town intro, but other than that, not impressed, actually.
Yeah, same here.
So a bit of a we both find it fairly weak. Okay, so let's get to the next one, Chattery Teeth. This was published in 1992. In something called Cemetery Dance, so fairly close to the publication date of the collection, fairly recent one. This one is read by Kathy Bates, and we all know Kathy Bates got a history of King, Dolores.
Misery.
Yeah, she's in Dolores. Yeah, Dolores Claiborne, Misery
as well. Yeah.
And various other readings and various other things. Great. She's a great read. She's great audiobooks. So this one's pretty solid. This is a fairly simple one. Salesman on his way home to his family sees this pair of really big, large walking chattery teeth with feet, really big, and the guy who's running the place, or I can't remember if it's the guy or his wife, sort of says, yeah, these aren't the plastic, they're made of metal, they'll give you a nasty nip and all this. But he's also, they don't work anymore, they don't chat, the key got lost or the mechanism broke or something like that. And it's in the middle of nowhere, this place, right?
yeah, in a dustpan or something. Yeah. So, ideal place for hitchhikers to want to hitch a ride, right, Mark? And that cues us to the next scene.
Yeah, well, the hitcher kind of also wants to buy some cigarettes, but doesn't have quite enough money. So the hero gives him enough. At that point, he kind of offers him he can have a ride, but he's fairly abrupt with him. He says, if you want to smoke, you can get out here, and don't call me dude, stuff like that. But then it turns out this guy wants to mug him in his own car, and he pulls out a knife. But our guy, who's called Bill Hogan, won't have it and drives the van off the road. Deliberately crashes the van rather than be mugged. But he gets trapped, and the mugger's still okay and coming at him with a knife. But the teeth kind of intercede, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very straightforward story. I mean, but so silly, but King makes it work, right, Mark? Which is amazing, really.
Yeah. I mean, King's written other stories where artifacts kind of protect someone, right? Is it the monkey or monkey paw or something?
Well, yeah, the monkey with the little monkey toy beating the cymbals. There, it's more malevolent. The monkey protects no one. But you're right. He's definitely the cursed object kind of.
Which ties into a lot of horror films with like the Warrens, like countries. Doesn't it?
Annabelle.
So basically doesn't Hogan actually say bite him?
He screams at him too.
But the teeth don't move, and the hitcher then sort of says, it's biting me, but he's having a joke. He says he's not going to bite me, and then the teeth have a go. And then you kind of, when he wakes up more and gets out of the van, there's kind of a bloody dragged trail, isn't there? So so
it worked for me.
Survives.
Yeah.
In the middle of this storm, he survives because the chattery teeth protect him. Then some months later, Hogan goes back to the same store where he's given with the teeth again. He says, we found these by the back door. Maybe you dropped them. And that guy that mugged you, the desert animals had a go at him and all this. So you go, whoa. And we also found out the guy who ran the store, who actually says, I've got the cancer and my wife's got the change, so we're not much fun to be around. She's all spruced up and the guy's dead. But she sort of says, he wants you to have the teeth. And I found the key and all this. And it ends with Hogan saying, well, I'm going to keep these teeth. Maybe pass them on to my son. Right?
That's right. He wants to pass them along. So they're going to be in the family for a good long while, right, Mark? As the unofficial protectors of the family.
God knows where they came from. But I thought it was a fun read, this. Very fun.
Yeah. Same.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I liked it. It was a lot of fun, man. This is a story I could reread. And, I've read in the past, I don't know where or when I did it. I think it was at a frat party or something. Once in uni or some, I read this to a room full of people, the story.
Wow.
And it's a surprisingly good read.
Yeah.
We were just messing about drunk and reading some stuff. And then I quickly popped into my room to get something. And it was a Nightmare of Dreamscapes was there. So I thought, okay, I'll flip through this to find a story to read to the guys. And everybody was reading. They're just drunk and reading.
I can see how this one or Popsy would be quite good in that context.
Yeah. It worked. I mean, there was a good reception from the crowd, after But the fact that you feel the insanity of the writer, the desperation at the end when he's stuck in the car, and then it becomes believable, because he's focusing on something to help him. The teeth.
Yeah.
And King's good at writing these moments of insanity, where things turn out to be actually true. I mean, haven't you been in that instance, Mark, where something bad happened to you and you just think, what if this could have happened? What if something could have interceded? Even if it's an object or something, and or what if something was lying around that you could have used? And this is definitely that kind of feeling that King imparts.
Sometimes weird stuff happens, and sometimes it does happen, and it's like, how could that possibly be true? And it does, it just does. Now I have to mention there was an adaptation of this, which was quite interesting. It was called Quicksilver Highway. It was a 1997 TV kind of movie by Mick Garris, who makes a lot of interesting King adaptations, right? But this story was only part of that. It was basically a 2-story movie with a rapping story, right? It was an anthology movie, but there was only 2 stories. And the other story was a story by Clive Barker called The Body Politic. However, the first half, it was Chattery Teeth. Now, there was a rapping element of a guy just turning up. And it's played by Christopher Lloyd, which was quite amazing.
Yeah.
As kind of a storyteller come traveling salesman come carnival show guy, right? And he's saying things like, I just tell stories, I don't judge and all that. What did you think of that?
Well, I like the horror host element to it, very reminiscent of EC as well, with the horror hosts, like the old witch and the crypt keeper. That part is great. And, I like Christopher Lloyd showing up in the odd horror. I mean, he had that Amazing Stories episode when Steven Spielberg was producing that series from the 80s, right, Mark? Amazing Stories, Go to the Head of the Class, where, Christopher Lloyd sometimes works in these tales. And, I like that rapping element because it's also a little bit reminiscent of what we talked about earlier with Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes, the carnival. It was and the man running the carnival.
At midnight, wasn't it? What was his name?
Was it midnight or I think it was. Let me quickly check here on my notes. I've got it right here.
It was that kind of character, right? Or the Seven Faces of Dr. Lau kind of character. He's like popping up and sort of.
It's
and it was very easy.
His name's also Quicksilver, right? Just
his name's Aaron Quicksilver, which is why it's called Quicksilver Highway. But I have to say the second story, the Clive Barker story, really didn't work for me. It was kind of goofy and silly, but the Chattery Teeth one did. It definitely did, and it was very similar, right? Very similar to the Red story, pretty much.
I mean, there was a lot of the same
dialogue. And it was kind of interesting and done quite well. Fairly bloodless because this is a TV movie, but it was fun enough. It was fun enough.
It took a comical turn, right, Mark? Like in the story, it never does, even though it's Chattery Teeth attacking a guy and basically chewing him up. In the movie, there's this comical bit where the Chattery Teeth actually starts attacking the guy, and it seems that the teeth is moving at supernatural speed, just chomping off bits. Even though it's still bloodless, right? The guy loses his fingers, his butt gets bitten at one point, his throat gets ripped out.
And I quite like the framing story with Christopher Lloyd, as you as you said, like Christopher Lloyd always delivers. Really, he's always watchable. Got a strange kind of haircut though, and he's kind of got strange clothes, and he looks kind of pale, but he's kind of he's trying to be avuncular, but he's a bit creepy as well. And Chris was definitely going for that here, and it works quite well. It does feel like the pilot for an anthology show. It has to be said.
Yeah, definitely, very much so. Yeah, but it'd be enjoyable for me as well. Yeah.
But the second story really doesn't work. The first Chattery certainly does. So actually a bit of a recommend for that particular segment is that like the first 45 minutes are worth watching, and maybe the end wrapping story, but the second story, no, not really, didn't work. Okay, this comes to the the last one we're going to cover. Dedication, first published in 1988 in a collection called Night Visions 5. This one's read by an actress called Lindsay Krause. This one was tricky. It's a memorable one. I remembered it quite distinctly, but there certainly is a point in the story where it's like, what the hell?
Yeah. I mean, I read this when I was a teenager, right, Mark, for the first time, and this was, my gag reflex started working over time. It's
still troublesome.
It's like very troublesome.
Many years, decades later, it's still kind of troublesome because it's such a weird premise. It is really about, I think, King is addressing what happens if a great artist has got a flawed personality. Are they a bigot or a misogynist or just a horrible human being all round? Does that affect how we look at art? Which is a big thing now, right? It's a big thing. So it is like it's kind of prescient.
Yeah, true.
This is essentially, we hear of there's a black housemaid who works in a New York hotel, and one of the guests who stays there a lot is this drunkard drinking writer who is clearly prejudiced and racist, but almost in a way that he doesn't interact with. He doesn't even acknowledge people with different races, almost. He's polite. It has to be said. He's a gentleman and will talk with respect to anyone. But in terms of treating, he clearly doesn't think people of other races are human even, right?
Yeah, exactly. He treats them as, objects, really, in part of the hotel. They're just there and to serve him and not worth his time or worth his acknowledgement, which is reprehensible, and that makes it sort of a tale of a weird kind of revenge for me as well, right, Mark? Because it's sort of this black lady seizing power or seizing something from this writer that he never would have given freely. I mean, we're not talking about the physical. I'm talking about the actual power that she steals from him and passes along to her son. But that part I like, the fact that she sort of, but I don't like the way, obviously, she gets it. I don't know why Stephen King had to go there.
It's so grim. There could have been another way of doing it. It's one of those, it's like the end of it. It's like, what the hell? it was a bit of that. It has to be said, really well written, I have to say. Memorable story. I remember this one quite distinctly, even though this is only the second time I've read it. Or consumed it, shall we say, in a way that say, oh no, I shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that. We will get to the grim details in a bit, briefly, I think.
Okay.
Essentially, she is aware of this writer. She even reads one of his books and really loves it, and can see what a great writer he is, even though he's this representable human being. Now, she's married to, a terrible lowlife who beats her, who hits her in the stomach when she finds out she's pregnant, and she doesn't know what to do. She does not know what to do. She's kind of stuck there. She's terrified to leave him. She doesn't know what to do. She does hear that she can be helped by this sort of voodoo priestess woman, whose name escapes me, but like Mama something. Who then goes and sees her, and who the priestess immediately tells her, "Yeah, you're pregnant." He goes, "What you got to do is find the child's father." And she goes, "Well, my husband's." He goes, "No, not a biological father, the natural father." What are you talking about? What are you talking about? There's all that, right? So
that part really works for me. I like the fact that he injected that bruja or voodoo in there, and that part's great. And then also the fact that she, Sorry, go on.
You're gonna have to tackle the maid. Kind of not sure if this woman helps her, but then she's tied to the room, and she sees the man has either had a wet dream or has done something, and his semen are on the sheets, right?
Yeah.
And kind of in a thrall from this spell or something, the woman eats it, right? And this happens over and over. So excuse me. So that's the what the hell bit we're talking about. Essentially, it's kind of what the hell. And this somehow then takes some of this writer's spirit and talent and it puts it into her unborn son, who becomes a writer. And then we get, when he gets his works published, there are obvious clear parallels between this bigot's work writing and her son's writing. Somehow he has inherited the talent from this man, not from his biological father. And in fact, his biological father dies in a botched sort of robbery, doesn't he? He's not around at all now, even before the boy's born. So, yeah, interesting. But there was that one element that is like, what the hell? And then we get the writer go back and sort of see the sort of voodoo woman, and it's basically she's asked to tell her tale to someone, isn't it? We should mention she's telling her tale to a colleague, and she says, I have to get it out, which is reminiscent of Dolores Claiborne telling her tale from that.
Yeah, that's right.
So it feels like it's a sort of dry run for how Dolores Claiborne is constructed in many respects.
Yeah.
I have to say I do like this story a lot, and as I say, I remembered it very well. But I did remember that scene in a negative way, but the rest of it in a positive way.
Yeah, this is kind of like I always look to Stephen King's grosser moments as following the philosophy that he espoused in Danse Macabre, right, Mark? Which is, if you can't scare them, then horrify them, and if you can't horrify them, essentially you should go for the gross out. Right? So I think
reflex, go for the gross out.
Yeah. So I think he started writing this story because he wanted to explore, like you say, the theme, which is how do you deal with great artists being reprehensible people? And then he started writing the story around that. And then he realized he had to inject some kind of an element of horror into it because now the story is not working for some reason. This is not what he said at all in interviews or in the introduction. No, this is just my personal, thoughts on the matter. And so because the story didn't work, he thought, okay, let's insert this final element of a gross out to hook the readers. No, for me, that works.
I get that she had to take some sort of essence from this man, to get that talent. But yeah, this is an unfortunate phrasing I've just used. But to use this, it's like, oh man, couldn't she bewitch him or do some spare? There's some ways. However, I quite like it as a story. It's just it's got that what the hell moment.
Yeah.
And it keeps happening too. So.
I was always thinking, like, I've thought about this story many times over the years, and every time I see Stephen King on a talk show appearing, like, let's say, I don't know, Jimmy Kimmel, or what would you call it, any kind of talk show where they interview him because a new book's coming out, I always think, what if the host wants to be a real bastard and say, now let's talk about the time you wrote a story about a black housemaid who eats a white guy's semen off of the sheets. If they throw that out there on air, what would King do? I always think about that. King should not be on talk shows because the possibility of someone dredging up either this story.
It, right?
It as well.
There's a few like that. It's like, Stephen, what were you thinking, Stephen?
Yeah.
Rewrite this, please. There's a bit of those. But yeah, it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah.
In many ways, we are accepting the flaws of the artist as well as the good stuff, right?
Yes.
In this story, it sort of crystallizes that. But it's a solid story. It's just they've got a bit that'll make you want to retch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, but it shows how much we love King, right, Mark? That we could forgive him even these, moments that, would make me normally another writer. I would completely stop reading his stuff and never want to think about him again. But King, he's King. Whatever, let him do what he wants. He's got enough clout to get away with
the thing is, he gets it right so often that when he gets it wrong, okay.
Yeah.
I can forgive him the end of Cujo, say, or things like that. You just do. Okay, that brings us to the end of this particular set. The next time we'll be talking about this, we'll be talking about the next 8 stories sometime in the near future. So it's been great to have you on. Tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, well, I'm at the moment, my main podcast, The Long Box of Darkness, is on a bit of hiatus, but we're coming back in, I think, September. I'm going to do a season 2, which is something I've never done, right, Mark? But, all podcasts platforms now give you that option to label your new episodes coming back after hiatus. I want to do a season 2. And this time around, we're going to focus on the something that got me into horror, at least horror comics, I should say, which is the Swamp Thing franchise over at DC Comics. Not just the Alan Moore run that's so acclaimed, but also the earlier 1970s stuff with Bernie Wrights and then obviously I'm also going to be talking about the movie at some point, the John Carpenter movie, and then also going to discuss the run leading up to Moore's seminal time on the title. And then, we've still got our other show, which I do with my other co-host, Billy, Into the Weird, which is a more, I should say, comic-centric, superhero-esque show focusing on the Marvel Bronze Age. We're still doing that. And then we've also launched a new show, but this might not be, appealing to horror fans. It's more in the war genre, where we're doing a show called A World on Fire, which is all about the All-Star Squadron comics from the 1980s set during World War II. So that's all.
You're busy.
Yeah, I'm kind of busy, but I'm not doing a lot of the editing, so I'm kind of I'm just along for the ride.
So I'm
cool. Enjoying myself. Yeah.
So that's
basically it.
I avoid that by doing very little editing. Actually, as possible.
The card, get over here.
It's a little rough, but it's fine. Okay, that sounds great. I certainly would look forward to hearing your Swamp Thing. I've never read much Swamp Thing, so it might pique my interest. It's not a character I know that much about. I think I saw in the movie. It was Wes Craven, the movie, right?
Yeah, it was.
So I kind of remember that a little. And it was fun. I remember that. But I don't really know much about the Swamp Thing. It's one of the few big comic book characters I don't really know much about or haven't read much, so you might pique my interest and get me reading some of those. I probably would read the earlier stuff before I got to Alan Moore, to be honest.
Excellent.
To immerse myself into it. But great. Okay, that sounds great. So you and I will be on next time to talk about the next 8 stories in the next episode. Looking forward to that. But I don't think it'll be as long an episode as these. These first 8 have got a lot of adaptations.
That's right.
And Nolan's Candidact's quite a long read as well, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
I think they're a bit shorter after this. And there's some really interesting ones coming up, I can tell you that.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to it, Mark. But thanks, man, for having me on. I'm always ready to discuss more King with you. So, yeah.
Great.
Well, I'll be back.
Yes, you'll be back. And soon as well. Okay, then. So, please say goodbye to our audience and we'll be off.
That's bye from me, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, and bye from me from Kingology.